The computer started trading on its own at 9:30 in the morning, at the exact instant the market opened on August 1st, 2012. For the first few seconds, it looked like an ordinary day. The machine was built to do something boring and invisible, taking orders from ordinary investors and routing them out to the exchanges, the way it had every morning for years. Instead, it began to buy. Then it sold. Then it bought again, faster. The same small decision repeating hundreds of times every second across 154 different stocks at once. No human had asked it to do any of this, and for the next 45 minutes, no one inside the building could make it stop. By the time they finally cut it off, the machine had fired more than 4 million trades into the market and lost the company more than $460 million. That was very nearly every dollar the firm had, and this was not some small operation. Knight Capital handled around 1 in every 10 trades on the American stock market. It was part of the plumbing the whole system quietly ran on. 45 minutes after the bell, that company was effectively broke. The lost money is the part everyone remembers. It is also not the part that killed Knight Capital. The firm survived the loss. 3 days later, it was rescued. And within a year, it was gone anyway. The name scrubbed off the building. The company swallowed whole. The man who had spent 17 years building it saved it over a single weekend. Saving it is what finished him. The company was run by a blunt, silver-haired Wall Street veteran named Thomas Joyce, and by the summer of 2012, he had turned it into a kind of invisible royalty. Most people had never heard of Knight Capital because it never wanted them to. It did not manage your retirement account or run advertisements. It sat in the middle of everything. When someone at home clicked buy on a few shares through a discount broker, that order very often traveled, in a fraction of a second, through Knight. The firm matched it, filled it, and passed it along, taking a sliver of a cent on every share. Do that across a huge slice of all the retail orders in America, and the slivers add up to one of the largest trading operations in the country. That entire business rested on software. Knight did not really have vaults or branches. What it had was code, and men like Joyce trusted that code the way a bank trusts its safe. That trust had already been tested once. Less than a year earlier, one of Knight's own systems had misfired during a routine technical test and cost the firm several $million in a single morning. They found the specific hole, and they patched it. What they never did was step back and ask the larger question, which was what else inside their systems could one day run wild, and whether anyone would be able to stop it if it did. The specific piece of code at the center of this story had a name, SMARS. The simplest way to picture it is as an extremely fast traffic controller for orders. When a large order came in, SMARS chopped it into many small pieces and sent those pieces out to the exchanges until the whole thing was filled. Traders called the big incoming order the parent, and the little pieces it created the children. A single parent order might become dozens of child orders, fired out in milliseconds, and the moment the full amount was bought, SMARS was supposed to recognize the job was done and quit. The ability to count what it had already done and then stop is the detail this whole story turns on. The reason SMARS failed on that particular morning had been sitting quietly inside Knight's systems for almost a decade, waiting. Knight had once used a different piece of software with an odd name, PowerPeg. Built into PowerPeg was exactly the kind of break we just described, a counter that tracked how many shares had been filled and told the system to stop once the order was complete. Knight stopped using PowerPeg back in 2003, but rather than tear the old code out, they left it there, switched off yet still present, still able to run if anything ever called on it. 2 years later, engineers moved that all-important counter, the break itself, to a different part of the system, and because PowerPeg was dead code that no one was ever meant to run again, they never went back to test what it would do without it. So a loaded weapon sat in the corner of the room for 9 years. What happened next is that someone, without knowing it, handed it a reason to fire. The New York Stock Exchange was, that summer, rolling out a new program for retail investors, set to switch on the morning of August 1st. Knight wrote fresh code so its customers could take part. And to turn that new feature on, its engineers reused an old on-off flag buried inside SMARS. The flag they picked was the very same switch that, years before, had been used to turn on PowerPeg. The plan quietly depended on one assumption, that the old PowerPeg code was truly gone. It was not. And the way the new code was rolled out is where the whole thing came apart. Knight's new code had to be copied onto 8 separate servers. the 8 machines that actually ran SMARS. In the days before August 1st, a technician went down the line and installed it, one server at a time. On 7 of them, the new code went in cleanly. On the 8th, for reasons that were never fully explained, the update simply never got copied over. Nobody checked. There was no second engineer signing off, no written rule that required anyone to confirm all 8 machines matched, so the firm walked into the most important morning of its year with 7 servers running the new program, and 1 server still holding the 9-year-old ghost of PowerPeg, wired directly to a switch that was about to be flipped on. Then the market opened. Orders poured in at 9:30, the way they do every morning. 7 of the 8 servers handled them correctly. The 8th did not. Every order that happened to land on that machine through the switch woke the dead PowerPeg code and set it running without its break, since the counter that was supposed to say the job is done had been moved away years earlier. So, the 8th server did the only thing that broken logic could do. It bought, and because it never registered that the order was already filled, it bought again and again for the very same order thousands of times a second, with nothing inside it able to count its way to a stop. Each purchase nudged the stock a little higher, so it kept buying at higher and higher prices. On the orders where it was selling, it drove the price down and kept selling into the hole. Buy high, sell low, repeat, faster than any human could read. There had actually been a warning, if anyone had been in a position to catch it. About 90 minutes before the open, Knight's own systems had sent out 97 emails to staff, and buried in the technical language was a phrase, "PowerPeg disabled." Those messages were never designed to be alarms, and nobody was watching that inbox for a crisis. 97 warnings went out, and the morning rolled on, as though nothing was wrong. Once the bell rang, the people on Knight's floor could see that something was badly wrong. A giant, impossible position was piling up on their risk screens, billions of dollars of stock accumulating in an internal account by the minute. But the tool showing them this was built to review trades after the fact, not to raise an alarm, and certainly not to slam on a brake. It lagged, it spat out numbers that did not add up, and it gave no one a single button that said, "Stop." Inside the building, people who had spent their whole careers around markets watched figures they could not explain and could not halt, climb by the second. So while the money burned at a rate of roughly $10 million a minute, almost $200,000 every second, the firm fell back on the only plan it had, which was to send its technology team chasing the problem through a live, running system with real money pouring out of it. Then they made it worse. Working fast, trying to kill whatever was misfiring, the technicians reached for the most logical fix they had. They had just deployed new code, so they pulled the new code back out. They uninstalled it from the servers, trying to return things to the way they had been that morning. It was the exact wrong move. Removing the new code did nothing to PowerPeg, because PowerPeg had never been the thing they installed. It had been hiding underneath the whole time. By stripping the new program off the 7 healthy servers, they exposed the buried PowerPeg code on those machines too, and handed the runaway logic 7 more engines to run on. For several minutes, the disaster did not shrink. It multiplied. It took about 45 minutes until roughly 10:15 to finally stop the bleeding. In that time, the machine had touched 154 stocks and thrown more than 4 million trades into the market. The shares of one tiny company, a firm called Wizard Software, had been rocketed from around $3.50 to nearly $15 on nothing but Knight's own robot buying itself into a frenzy. When it finally stopped, Knight was holding billions of dollars of stock it had never meant to buy, purchased at prices its own machine had inflated. And here, the market showed no mercy. Only 6 of the affected stocks had moved so violently that the exchanges agreed to cancel those trades. The other roughly 150 were allowed to stand, which meant Knight could not simply erase them. It had to accept those positions, carry them, and sell them back into the market at a loss. The final figure was more than $460 million, gone in the length of a coffee break. It was more than the firm had earned in a very good year, and very nearly all the capital it possessed. The next day, Thomas Joyce went on television and refused to hide behind jargon. He called it what his customers already feared. It was a software bug, he said, and it happened to be a very large software bug. The firm, he said, had all hands on deck. What he did not say, because he could not yet know it, was that being right about the cause would not be nearly enough to save what he had built. A firm that touches 1 in 10 American trades cannot simply be allowed to fail on a Wednesday and disappear by Friday. Knight held other people's orders and other people's trust, and if it collapsed outright, the damage would spread through the market. So over one frantic weekend, Joyce did the thing that saved the company and, in the very same motion, gave it away. He raced to raise emergency money, and he found it, around $400 million, from a group of rivals and banks willing to bail Knight out. But rescue money on that kind of deadline is never cheap. In exchange for saving the firm, those investors took most of it. The deal handed roughly 70% of the company to the people writing the checks, and it placed representatives of those rivals directly onto Knight's board. One of the firms at that table was an aggressive trading outfit called Getco, and it had been circling Knight long before the machine ever misfired. This is the answer to the question hanging over the whole story. The 45 minutes did not destroy Knight Capital. The rescue did. The loss was survivable, and Knight survived it. What the firm could not survive was the price of being saved. Within months, Getco completed a takeover, folded Knight into a new company called KCG, and the Knight name began to vanish. By the following July, Thomas Joyce was out of the top job at the company he had spent 17 years building. A few years after that, the whole thing was sold off again to a firm called Virtu for nearly $1.5 billion. The independent giant had ceased to exist. More than a year after the meltdown, regulators delivered their verdict, and it was quietly damning. They found that Knight had no adequate way to halt its own machine, that it had left dead code live and pushed out a release with no one checking the work. The firm paid a $12 million penalty, the first ever under a rule written for the sole purpose of forcing companies to prevent exactly this kind of accident. The rule already existed. Knight had simply never built the controls it demanded. The strangest part of the whole collapse is that nothing actually broke. The 8th server did not malfunction. The power peg code did not glitch. It carried out its instructions perfectly, precisely as they were written, millions of times in a row. The catastrophe was never a machine failing to obey. It was a machine obeying with total and flawless loyalty, an order that no living person had meant to give and that no one had ever built a way to take back. Knight Capital had spent 17 years becoming one of the quiet engines of the American market. The last thing it ever did as an independent company was buy and sell 4 million times in 45 minutes, flawlessly, for no reason at all.